All right. Good morning, everybody. Glad that we have this time to be together. I'm going to share with you my screen. We're going to be bringing up a review of where we've been. We've been studying from the book of Ephesians. There's so much in this book, and really my struggle has been with what do you leave out? I mean, obviously, we have to leave something out. So let's give a real quick review. The author is no doubt Paul. Probably he was in Rome when he wrote this. If he was, that was probably around 62 to 63 AD. It was most likely to be what we call a circular letter, a letter sent to a congregation first, and then they would share it with others. But it was for sure intended for the Ephesians. We know that in chapter 1, verse 1. And Paul knew them very well. He had spent 3 years with them. And so they knew him. He knew them. They knew him. And that would obviously would help explain the intimacy that you see in their relationship as he's writing this book. All right. Doesn't seem to be any problem, but he is reminding them of the beauty of Christianity. And that's the word I've chosen to be the key word, the word beauty. So a couple of weeks ago, we looked at the beauty of salvation. The beauty of salvation is seen in that it is from sin, and it is by grace, and it is for good works. And it is a beautiful thing to know that we have been saved. It wasn't even our own doing. We didn't earn it. We don't deserve it, but we have it. And therefore we are, as he says, his workmanship. We are his workmanship. He did the work. We are created for good works. Next, we talked about the beauty of unity. And this is where we were last week. We talked about the attitudes that have to be present for unity. He lists there in verses 1 through 3 several things that must be present. The grounds for unity. What is it that we are unified on? It's not just a matter of having some union, but rather having unity based on some common ground, and that is those 7 ones that he shares in verses 4 through 6. And then there's the action of unity. We're not just unified for the sake of unity. Unity feels good and is nice, but there's more to it than that. Unity allows us to do what we're supposed to do. When we don't have unity, then we can't do what we are supposed to do. So we have to have unity, and therein lies the beauty of unity. All right, that's got us caught up to speed. Now today, let's talk about the beauty of holy living. These are 21 verses. We won't read all of them, but I do want to sort of outline it, put it in break these down into smaller bites, and look at the beauty of holy living, because that really seems to be the focus in the first part of chapter 21, or the first part of chapter 5, going through the first 21 verses. Now, most of you are familiar that starting in verse 22, he's going to shift to the beauty of the family. That's what we will do next. But for today, the beauty of holy living. Notice, first of all, he says that we are to walk in love. We won't read all 21 of these verses, but he says, be imitators of God as beloved children and walk in love. Now, this word walk is one that he is going to use repeatedly in this chapter, and so we will also. But first of all, he says, walk in love. And this word walk is obviously it's a metaphor, but it describes one's way of living. What is the normal way of living for you? This would be similar to 1 John chapter 1, where he says that we are to walk in the light. Well, you and I know that we don't always walk in the light, right? We sometimes do things that are not associated with light, but rather darkness. Is it still possible to say we walk in the light when we aren't perfectly sinless? Well, yes, it is, because what is being understood in this term walk is that it is your normal manner of life. I mean, let's look at it from the opposite. There are those who are wicked, they are ungodly, they are, whatever, fill in the blank with the adjective of your choice, but they occasionally do good things, right? I mean, they might, not do something that's bad. They might do something that's good, but their manner of living is in the dark, despite occasionally doing things that are of the light. And so this term walk, it doesn't mean perfection, but it does mean that is our general way of living. So he says, first of all, walk in love, just as Christ also loved you and gave himself up for us, an offering and a sacrifice as a fragrant aroma. So let's back up now and see there are two reasons given that we should walk in love. The first one is, let me see if the first one is because you are God's children. Be imitators of God as beloved children. Now, again, another 1 John reference, go to 1 John chapter 4, verse 7, God and 8, God is love. God is love. If God is love and we are his children and we are imitators of him, then what do? We also love. And so the first point that he's making here is you need to walk in love because you are God's children. And if you are heirs of him, we tend to take on traits of our parents, right? If you are God's children and he is love and he is loving, then we too should walk in love. The second thing that he says is that we should walk in love because of the price that was paid for us. Now, we can also say that the price paid for us was motivated by love. We know that, right? God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son for us. But notice that he says, just as, in addition to that, just as Christ also loved you and gave himself up for us. And his sacrifice, he says, was an offering that was a fragrant aroma. I like nice smells. How about you? He's saying that this sacrifice that was motivated by love, was completely prompted by Jesus's love, is the sacrifice, the love there is what we need to be imitating in our life, and we need to be walking in as well. And so the first point that he says is that we're to walk in love. Now, he follows it up with some things that we're not to walk in, right? And he contrasts them. Verse 3 going down through verse 5, immorality, impurity, greed, filthiness, silly talk, coarse jesting, immorality, impure, covetous, all these things. Don't walk in those, but do walk in love. Why? Because holy living is much more beautiful than unholy living. All right, let me stop here for just a minute and take your comments and questions. If you want to make a question or a comment, just unmute yourself and feel free.
The reference there to a fragrant or sweet-smelling aroma, the sacrifices in the Old Testament were described as either a sweet-smelling aroma to God, or those that were unworthy or detestable to him. But the idea is that Christ was totally acceptable, that sweet-smelling aroma to God, and our lives ought to be like him, to be an offering acceptable to God.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it's one or the other, right? And we see in this chapter, with the beauty of holy living, if we walk in love, for example, is it is a fragrant aroma to God. Mike?
I always like to read, when I read, how does this affect today? We can talk about what it was back then, or what he was writing as it applied then, or what was going on then. But we're in today's times. You just look at these traits, what he's talking about here, these things, and they've always been, not that they weren't. or they're just suddenly appearing today. But many of these things, it seems like they're just more prevalent going on today in these times. The immorality, impurity, the greed, all these things.
Yeah, and he contrasts, the holy living that we're talking about, that we should be doing. We should be walking in love. And then he immediately transitions in verse 3, but, and there's your word of transition, but do not let. And then he names all of these things be named among you. So you walk in love. You're children of God. And so there is the obligation to walk in love. And see if we can get this back up again. And you do that because you're his children and because of the price paid for you. All right, another section of this a smaller section of this section is that we are to walk in light. And here's our word again. I told you he's going to use this a number of times. We're going to walk in light. Therefore, verse 7, do not be partakers with them. Who is them? All the people he just listed in verses 3 through 6 and the things that they do. You don't do that because you were formerly of darkness, but now you are children of, now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. You used to be in the darkness. Now remember, does this sound familiar? It should, because in chapter 2, he says you were formerly dead. You were in your own trespasses. You were given to disobedience. You were children of wrath. You fulfill the desires of the flesh, but God, being rich in mercy. Well, now just move forward just a little bit. And he says, you used to be in light, but now you used to be in darkness. I'm sorry, 3 through 6, you used to be in darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. And therefore, because of that, walk as children of light. How do children of light walk? What is their manner of life? How do they behave? How do they speak? What do they do? And he says in verse 9, for the fruit of the Spirit consists in all goodness, in righteousness and truth, trying to learn what is pleasing to the Lord. And then again, he follows this section with what you should do, verses 8 through 10, with what you should not do. Don't participate in the unfruitful works of darkness. There's the contrast, light and dark. But instead expose them. Not only do you not participate in the works of darkness, you actually expose them, because it is disgraceful even to speak of the things which are done by them in secret. But all things become visible when they are exposed by the light. For everything that becomes visible is light. For this reason, it says, awake, sleeper, and arise from the Lord, and Christ will shine on you. So the focus in this section is we're to walk in light. And again, this conjures up memories of 1 John chapter 1, verse 7. We're to walk in the light as he is in the light. You might remember that it says when we do that, there is a continual cleansing for our sins. And so here he says you used to be in darkness, but now you're in light. So walk like you're in light. Act like you're in light. And don't go back to participating in the things of darkness. Walk in light. All right, let me stop here for any questions, comments, observations, words of wisdom.
Keith, in those days, there apparently were teachers who were teaching that because you are spiritually enlightened, then you can participate in all manner of evil things, and they're good to you. They're spiritual because your spirit is pure. And in the same way today, there are many people in the name of Christ, in the name of the Bible, saying, oh, Christ is so liberating that these restrictive moralities that you're trying to control me with, I can ignore that and live in whatever lifestyle makes me happy because I'm enlightened.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt. And I mean, there's human nature at work, right? We like to have the assurance and the blessings and the promise, or feel like we have it, without it really, as we used to say, cramping my style. I can kind of do what I want to do, and I still make the claims. I still feel like I have the assurances, and no doubt there were some in Ephesus doing the same thing. And and perhaps that's why he's actually addressing this now. Maybe he knew of something specific, but he's saying you used to walk in darkness, and these are the things darkness does, but you're now in the light. And so you need to walk like you're in the light. Anyone else? Raymond? Can you unmute yourself, Raymond? There you go.
The word walk denotes a way of life, an active way of life. And as we were studying about this word from the book of Ephesians, you could have a series of lessons or a sermon. Chapter 4, verse 17, no longer walk as Gentiles. That would be the negative. Don't do this anymore. But in chapter 2, we are to walk in good works, which God prepared for them. And then in chapter 4, we are to walk worthily of the calling wherewith we've been called. That is a way of life. In chapter 5, verse 2, to walk in love. Verse 8, walk as children of light. So those are just some thoughts you could glean from the book of Ephesians in one lesson. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. He definitely enjoyed using this term walk, and I appreciate that. I get it, because it as you said, it denotes a manner of life. When it comes to holiness, goodness, godliness, we don't hit it 100%. For that matter, take the opposite. Nobody necessarily hits darkness 100%, but that's not the point. 100% is not the point. The manner of life is what really is under consideration here. So walk in love, because you are God's, and He's love. Walk in light, and let me see. Let me back up here. I think I did something wrong here. I got crazy with my clicks. This toggling back and forth is, here we go. All right, I got it. Walk in light, walk in love, and then one more, walk in wisdom. Verse 15, therefore, because of everything I just said, okay, don't participate in the evil deeds, the deeds of darkness, but rather walk in light. Therefore, be careful how you walk. Don't walk as unwise men, but as wise, making the most of your time, because the days are evil. So then do not be foolish. There's a contrast again, right? Walk in wisdom and don't be foolish. But understand rather what the will of the Lord is. And then he concludes that section in verse 21 by saying, be subject to one another in the fear of Christ. So again, we have another walk. He says you need to be careful how you walk. Now, if you're walking in the darkness, if you go out at night or you're going through somewhere, you're paying more attention to how you walk, where you step, than normal, because you know you're in the darkness. Well, there's a sense in which we're all walking through this world of darkness, and we need to be careful how we walk and pay attention to how and where we walk. And he says, don't walk like unwise men, but rather like wise people. And so that's why I say that the focus here is walk in wisdom. And we need to make the most of our time. How do you walk in wisdom? You make the most of your time. I think it's interesting. We tend to waste a lot of time, don't we? And not every minute that is not productive is wasted. I mean, I think there's certainly time for needing to rest and recuperate. There's certainly time to recreate. We waste a lot of time. And he says that's not wise either. By the way, you might remember Psalm 90 and verse 12. Psalm 90:12 says, teach us to number our what? Our days. We tend to number our years. And we number our milestones. But he says you need to actually number your days. Every day in itself is valuable. Every day in itself is a gift. And we need to pay attention to that. So one of the ways that we walk in wisdom is that we show that we appreciate the value of time and that we make the most of it. And so if you're going to be enjoying the blessings of holy living, you're going to have to walk in love because God is love. And we'll have to walk in light because God is light. And we'll have to walk in wisdom and not do the foolish things of the world. So in a nutshell, that is verses 1 through 21 of Ephesians chapter 5. Now, we have several minutes left, and so I'll open this up to anybody who wants to unmute themselves and speak. You speak, I'll sip. Anyone? No one? Well, I can actually, no, next is the beauty of the family. And I'm tempted to just go ahead and begin that now, but I can't. I can't really hardly begin to get into it before the time will run out. So I won't do that. So maybe we'll just just wrap it up now. Anybody? Going once?
I'll make a comment.
Open. Yeah.
I've been running my mouth too much. But and Raymond mentioned the walk, and of course that's the obvious theme here. But the word there is not act, like once in a while you do a deed of kindness or you say something, but it's in a way that it becomes characteristic of you. The daily, not that you don't stumble, but these things need to become characteristic, and that's hard. It's easy for us to sit around in a class like this and say, "Oh yeah, we should do this, and we should be wise, and we should be loving, and we should be united, and we should avoid all these evil things." It's a lot harder to go out and make that characteristic of us. Here this unity. I haven't heard anybody say, no. We should be foolish. Our speech should be foolish. Our actions should be foolish. And boy, we ought to get out there and really quarrel and fight with one another. And unity, what's that? We're not doing that. But it's in our daily lives. And as a consistent and to actually be characteristic of us, that's where it's a little harder.
Well, that's where it's a lot harder. And that was my point early on when I talked about this word walk. Walk describes what is the normal characteristic of our life. And we have the old saying, even a blind squirrel can find an acorn sometimes. Well, even the most ungodly, walking in the darkness kind of person can occasionally do something that's good. But that doesn't mean they're walking in the light, right? So, and that's why he says, be careful how you walk. Because as Neil pointed out, we can talk in theory. It's one thing to speak in the abstract. It's another to live in the concrete. And that is where the challenge comes in. But hold on just a minute, Joyce. But Neil mentioned where it becomes characteristic of us, because we've known people who were godly and may have said something or done something that wasn't. We think, wow, that's not characteristic of them. That's the ideal. You know, maybe somebody who's ungodly and they do something that's good, and we think, wow, that's not characteristic of them. What becomes characteristic of us is our walk. And that's what we need to focus on. Yes, Joyce.
I was just thinking with this lesson, and I've thought a lot lately, that wherever we are, whatever we're doing, that others should be able to see Christ in us and know we belong to God without any doubt.
Yeah,
So
and when we are walking in love and in light and wisdom, that's exactly what happens. And so that's why he's saying, he's reminding the Ephesians, look, your walk, your manner of life is something that ought to be holy. Perhaps that's the single word to describe this walk, holy. Be holy as he is holy. And so, and that's why today I've decided to call this the beauty of holy living. We've already seen the beauty of salvation, the beauty of unity, and now today the beauty of holy living. All right, anybody else? Any other questions, comments? We have 3 whole minutes. So
there is a biblical expression, I believe, beauty of holiness.
yeah.
See.
And it really is, isn't it? No, we enjoy the beauty of holiness in someone else. We don't always enjoy trying to be holy ourselves. And yet somebody else needs us to be holy. Somebody else needs to be able to enjoy the beauty of holiness in us as well as ourselves. By the way, speaking of holy, a couple of weeks ago, Brent's Sunday night devotional was talking about being kind to your spouse. Joyce made a comment in there that really struck me. She said, I was always kind to Weldon, but if I had him back, I'd be even more kind. And I thought that one kind of got me, because number one, you better be kind to my buddy. And I know you were, but I think that, talk about perspective. You know, it's one thing to not be unkind. It's another thing to be kind. And Paul is doing a really good job of contrasting what we should do and what we should not do. And both are important. It's not enough to not be unkind. We also must be kind. It's not enough to be not unloving, but we must also be loving. And when we think about the people we interact with every day, maybe even our spouse, and we realize one day maybe we won't have them, doesn't that change our walk? Doesn't that change how we live? And the fact that you may be the only Christian or the Christian that someone may know the most or the best, all of that just points to the importance of what he says in verse 15, be careful how you walk. Don't walk as unwise people, but walk as wise. Raymond?
All right. You take Abraham, a man of great faith. That's the totality of his life. He was a man of faith. But when you search the Old Testament scriptures, he was not always without fault.
Oh, yeah.
The
For sure.
totality of his life. So when you look at a life of a Christian, for example, I had a good friend who died yesterday, Jimmy Matthews.
30 seconds, Raymond.
Totality of his life was good.
Yeah.
He walked faithfully. But that doesn't mean he was not without fault.
Right, and we need to understand that, right? I mean, there have been people who've been a little discouraged. They're not perfect, and so they feel like they're, not walking like they should. But that's not the case. That's not even the goal. Is perfection's not even on the table. But walking in the light, letting that be the characteristic of our life in love and light and wisdom. That is the beauty of holy living. All right, glad y'all were with me today. We'll meet up again soon. Take care. God bless.